neat features for math and science teachers is the formula question under quizzes. So to show you, I'm in a quiz and I'm just trying to add a question to it. We'll click New Question. You'll notice we have our drop-down menu. We'll click Formula Question. And just like any other question, it tries to give you some instructions here. Sometimes they're hard to understand, but they can guide you through. But let's try to build a formula question. And as an example, let's say we're working on our multiplication facts, and today we're working on times 3. Let's say we want to give students a quiz of 20 multiplications that are all 3 times a number or a number times 3. So what we can do is we can ask the question of 3 times, and now what we'll do is we'll use brackets, which are next to the P key, and we'll enter our variable in here. You can call your variable whatever you want. A lot of people use X, but since there's an X right next to this in the problem, I'll just use the word number. And what we're telling Canvas here is we're going to take 3 and multiply it by some number, and we want the students to tell us what that equals. Okay? And you don't have to put this equal sign, I just like to. And we'll scroll down. If you click out of the box now, that will register to Canvas that you're ready to manipulate your variables. So if I scroll back up, Canvas has recognized that anything within this bracket is a variable. So it says, okay, we have a variable that we've called number, and it's asking what is the minimum value you want that variable to be. And usually, if you're doing just multiplication tables, that might be 0. The maximum value might be 12. You can technically put decimal places, but in a times 3 multiplication quiz, you're probably not going to. And you'll notice over here on the right, it gives you an example value. So Canvas has randomly, for the purpose of building this question, chosen 5. If you don't like 5, just hit recompute. It'll give you a different number. So now we can scroll down to our formula definition. We need to actually, for Canvas, define what mathematical process it's got to do. Well, if we scroll back up and look at our question one more time, we have 3, and we're multiplying that by some number. So we will just tell Canvas to take the number 3, multiplied by, and for the purposes of this formula, kind of like in Microsoft Excel, you have to use Shift 8 to get the asterisk for your multiplication sign. And we're going to multiply that by the number, or by the variable number. So what we've told Canvas is we're going to take 3 multiplied by whatever number Canvas picked for that instance. In this case, that was 2. So when we hit save, you'll notice our result is 6, because sure enough, 3 times 2 is 6. If you wanted to check it again, you could just hit recompute. This time Canvas drew 7, and sure enough, 3 times 7 is 21. So we know we have our formula built correctly. So we have a new option now to generate possible solutions. It really doesn't matter how many you pick here, as long as you pick enough to randomize it. I go with 50 usually, because you have a max of 200, and that takes a long time to generate 200, but 50 sounds good. You're pretty much certain to catch a wide sample if you have 50 examples. You can allow margins of error, so if you are doing something with decimals and your students might round a little bit differently, you can have a margin of error here, but for the purposes of this, we want our answers exact. So when I hit generate, Canvas is going to randomize 50 examples of 3 times a number. And you can see here, you can scroll, here are the numbers it picked, here are the answers for those. Now, well, we got lucky and we generated a lot of 1s, but that's okay because we also generated a lot of different numbers. As long as we've generated enough to hit every number in our 0 to 12 range, then we know we're good. So now we'll hit update the question, and you'll see the question has now populated on your quiz. Now, a really neat feature is these question groups. If we use question groups with formula questions, it will automatically draft however many questions out of your formula that you want. So for example, if I tell this question group to pick 10 questions and create the group, I can then drag this question down into that question group, and it will pick 10 of these questions of the 50 it just generated. So to show an example, I'll click Save. Then when I preview this quiz, you'll notice it generated 10 different multiplications, 3 times a number. 3 times 8, 3 times 7, 3 times 3, 3 times 10, 3 times 6. And here you'll see we actually did get a duplicate. That can happen, but every student's will be different in different orders every time. Something you might also consider is entering a second question into that question bank, where instead of it being 3 times a number, you put the variable number in the front, a number times 3. That way your students aren't always seeing 3 out front. But this is just one of the uses for a formula question in Canvas.